In this segment, we're going to learn to work with crystals. And I'm going to show you how you can place individual crystals into an embroidery design and how you can save those crystals to work with the cutting machine to create your crystal templates. And we'll take a look at how you can create a shape and then either outline that shape with crystals or fill that shape in with crystals. I'll show you how to convert existing embroidery patterns or elements into crystal shapes, and how we can take graphics and apply crystal fills or outlines to your graphics. So why don't we start with just simply using the individual crystal tool. And basically here on your left-hand toolbar, where you have your freehand drawing tools like the freehand drawing tool, the Bezier tool, and the outline tool, we also have the Create Crystal Shape tool. And so if I go ahead and select crystal from that list, you'll see that my mouse now becomes a mouse that has a small crystal attached to it. And if I zoom in nice and close on my embroidery design, you can see clearly that there is a crystal attached to my mouse, and I could then move around and place crystals wherever I want. Now, before I start adding crystals, I'll show you the tool options for the crystal tool. If you look under tool options, you can see that I have, first of all, to choose the palette. So it's set for Swarovski round, and under that palette, there's other choices. So you could choose the default palette, or I'm not sure how to say this one, but there's another brand of crystals, and so these are the brands that you can choose from. And then you choose the color and shape of the crystal. So these are the different choices that are available. And then once you choose the shape of your crystal and the color, then you can also select the size. So you choose the specific crystals and sizes that you have available to work with, and then you go ahead and you place the crystals in your design wherever you decide that you want them. So I can just simply add a few crystals by coming around and clicking in these different places. So whenever you're done, you would then be able to go on and save this for the cutters. Now maybe I'll add in a different color, so I'll have a couple of different colors of crystals. So you just keep adding crystals until you're happy with it. And when you're ready to go forward with the design, then what you can do is choose the File drop-down menu and Export. And you can choose to export this design to crystal cutters. And when you do that, a window opens up, and in this window you have the different brands of cutting machines that are available for use with the software. And so you would choose the brand of cutting machine that you have to send the design to your machine, or you can choose this option here to be able to save the design to a folder in your computer. And you can see here the sort of layout of what I've created, and there would be two different sort of colors of crystals that I created, so that would all be represented in this information that's sent to the machine. And if you create in your embroidery design any outlines or appliques, then those things can also be prepared for and sent to the cutting machine. So that's how you would save the design for your crystal cutting machine. Now, we've looked at how to create an individual crystal just by clicking basically and selecting them. Why don't we take a look at how you can fill or outline a shape with crystals? And what I'll do is just choose one of my drawing shapes and then create a object. And you can see that by default my object comes up and it's got a light blue fill and a dark blue outline. And I could choose to apply either crystals to the fill or to the outline of that shape. So what we could do is, I'll just zoom in a little closer. Why don't we choose, so here on your object properties, you have your fill tab, and you'll notice that I have an option for crystal fill, or on the outline tab, I have an option for crystal outline. So why don't I go ahead and choose to add a crystal outline to this shape. So as soon as I clicked on that, you'll see that it added the crystals around my shape, and they've been added in the last crystal that I used. So when I set the tool options up here, earlier with the individual crystal, that's now been remembered, and now the way that I can control the type of crystal is going to be under my object properties. So here, for this object which we have selected, we've chosen crystals for the outline, and I can control, again, the same information, the palette, the size, and the color of the crystal. Now you get a little bit more of a visualization of what those crystals would look like if you used them. Now, we also have some additional control, and one of them is the spacing, and the other one is the offset. And I'm going to show you what those look like to change. So, for example, right now the spacing is set at 0.8 millimeters between crystals, and if I want, I can go ahead and change this amount. And when I just make it a larger amount, I'll say 2 millimeters, and what it did was increase the space between my crystals. And the other option is offset, and if I click on offset and then choose, for example, a 2 millimeter offset, it moves those crystals outside of my shape. And if I create a negative number, it'll offset those crystals to the inside of the shape. So that's your ability to change, I guess, exactly where in relationship to the shape that this outline of crystals will go. So why don't we give this shape an outline of crystals 3 millimeters outside of the shape. And then we'll go ahead and change to the fill tab and add crystals to the fill of the shape. So there you can see the crystals that are filling the shape, and maybe just to give some separation, I'll choose a different color for those crystals so that we have red crystal outline and blue crystal fill. And what I'm going to show you now is when I change to a crystal fill, I have, not only do I have the pattern, the palette, Swarovski palette, I have the size and I have the colors, but I also have the type of fill pattern. So basically you can call it a fill pattern, or it's a type of array pattern, I guess, as well. So really they are named rectangle, circular, contour, single line, shape fit, and line fit. And this is what I mean. If I choose rectangular, then the shape is filled in with rows and columns of crystals. If I choose circular, then the crystals repeat in a circular pattern. If I choose contour, the crystals are going to contour around that shape. And I have single line, which is maybe not meant for this type of a shape, but there will be, I'll look at other shapes later in the video of why you might want to use single line. And we have shape fit, and we have line fit. And so those are all different choices that you can choose that will give you different results in the way the crystals are filling in your shape. Now, for each of those fill patterns, you have options that you get to control. So, for example, with line fit, I get to control an offset. So if I want to, I can move the edges of the crystals either inside or outside of my shape. And I also have horizontal spacing. So that means the distance between each individual along the rows are set. So let me try and draw this. So let's just increase the number. Okay, so what it did, it still has default spacing coming this way, but it's increasing the spacing this way. And so it makes lines to fill in your shape. And so another choice would be, let's say, for example, rectangle. And notice, because I changed the horizontal spacing in the line fit to be 3 millimeters, that the rectangle now has the horizontal spacing set to 3 millimeters. So what that means is, when you're making changes to these numbers, and then you change the style of fill, those things are remembered, and it doesn't go back to kind of the default settings. Now you can, if you create a new object, it'll always start with the default settings, but as you change them, that gets remembered regardless of whether you change the fill pattern. Now we have the ability to control them back. I could make it be 1 millimeter each way or whatever. You can control the horizontal spacing. So for a rectangle, it's horizontal and vertical spacing. So if I want to have 2 millimeters going one way and 3 millimeters going the other way. I can choose that. We also have the start angle, which right now my start angle is set at 0, so completely horizontal. I could easily change that. I'll type in 25, and it puts the starting angle along a 25-degree angle line. And then the slant angle, see right now I have like a right angle for the shape of this rectangle. If I change this to be, let's say, 45, then it moves that angle to be 45 degrees, and therefore the second row ends up kind of offset from the first row, so creating a different style of pattern. So just controlling these numbers, you can really change the appearance of your fills. So depending on what you put in these different situations. And so basically, this is how you can change it mathematically or numerically. But you also have this little green angle line which you can control your pattern with. So for example, if I zoom in a little bit more closely, right now I have this object selected with the transformation tool. So it's just simply selected with transform. This is called edit shape nodes, and when I choose edit shape nodes on a crystal fill, I have the ability to, it gives me little bullets, little radio bullets that I can choose to select these three different crystals. And so for example, I can change the slant angle by clicking and dragging on this one. So if I zoom out, you can see that a little easier, that I can change the slant angle that way. I can change my horizontal spacing this way, and I can change my vertical spacing this way, and I can change my slant angle this way. So now I can see how easily I can choose different appearances of my rectangular fill of the crystals. So that's rectangle fill and how I've created a fill for this crystals. Now I'm going to choose circular. So with circular, again, I have the offset option. Remember, if I turn offset on and when I give this a 2 millimeter offset, it's going to push it towards the outside. If I go a negative 2 millimeters, in this case, negative pushes it towards the outside because it's a fill. Negative pushes it towards the outside, and positive pushes it towards the inside. So basically just creating more space between the outside of the shape. I can control the horizontal spacing, the start angle, and the number of steps. Now, for example, the number of steps, that's basically how many times this is going to travel this circle around my shape. If I turn that up to a higher number, it's going to pack in more circles, or more crystals, 8. And if I put it to a lower number, it'll put less crystals in. So there I have 8. Now, my horizontal spacing set at 3. If I change it to 4, it's going to add more spacing between the rows. And my start angle, 343, well, and again, I can change all these things in Edit Shape Node. So you can see that's the start angle. There's your angles. Or your number of steps, sorry. So this is the number of steps that I can control the number of steps that way. And then this is my spacing. So you can see that you can play with this until you get the design that you are interested in having. It's really up to you what your crystal patterns can look like. Now, so that's circular. This is contour. And in contour, you control the offset once again. I'll turn that back to 0. Puts them right along the shape. So in this case, because we have an outline, maybe we would like to move those to the inside, the 2 millimeters, giving that little definition of space in between the rows. It's up to you. Again, the horizontal and vertical spacing, so if I change those to be smaller numbers, I'll get more in the rows, and then the vertical spacing, if I make that a smaller number, I'll get more rows that contour around the shape. So because it's contour fill, each row tries to follow the shape of the object, and this can be any object. Any shape you can draw, you can fill in with crystals like this. Now, we also have this option called follow angle, and that's not going to make a heck of a lot of sense with a round crystal because it doesn't really matter what angle the crystal's on. But if you had, for example, heart-shaped crystals, when you choose follow angle, it gets the hearts to always stay following the angle of each line of the contour, versus if it's not turned on, then you would have all your hearts sitting at the exact same angle line. So all of the way around, they would stay at the same angle versus turning their angle to face the shape. I don't know if that's easy to explain without having an actual heart-shaped crystal, but I didn't notice any heart-shaped crystals at the moment, so perhaps that's something that will be, more types of crystals maybe available in updates. So that's contour, and another option is single line. Now with single line, you have the control of the offset and the spacing. Shape fit. And when you go to shape fit, the crystals try to fill that shape the best they can. And so again, we have the ability to choose the offset, horizontal vertical spacing, and the start angle. And in all these cases, when there's the small green angle, when you have edit shape nodes on, you can control these types of things. So because this is shape fit, I don't have that ability to change the slant angle like I do with the rectangle. I can change the start angle, and I can change the horizontal, and I can change the vertical spacing. So basically, matching the settings that you have here is what you can change in with this little green arrow. So these are the different styles of fill that you can apply to your shapes. Now, what I'd like to do before we start working with other graphics is just take a look at adding a couple of different types of objects and seeing how those different types of fills will apply to them. So why don't we, for example, create some text? And then I'll just select my text tool and click over here to start a text prompt, and I'll just type in my name, and then I'm going to select that text with the transform tool and make it just a little bit bigger. Let's see how it looks a little bit small for crystals. So maybe we want to try adding crystals to my name. And so we could choose, first of all, you could do crystal fill or crystal outline, but again, it's not very big, so I don't think trying to place an outline around this is going to work. So we could go with a crystal fill. And so I choose crystal fill, it comes up with shape fit, and it basically looks like that. Now, if I select it and choose, for example, line fit, and I get a better sort of a more appropriate fill in for my name, and you go a single line, then you'll just get sort of like a one single line for my name. Now, this is where, okay, everything looks great, except for maybe the R's could use one more little crystal. Well, that's where you have that ability to go in and, first of all, separate the crystals is one of the options that we haven't looked at yet. And then another option is adding more individual crystals. So just as an example, we filled this area in with crystals, but we're unhappy with one little part of it. This option here says separate to crystals. So I'll go ahead and click on that right now. And it opens up and sort of individualizes each one of those crystals. And so now, instead of selecting the whole word, I have just the crystal that I want to select. Now, what I could do is I could come in here and I could move the crystal to be a better placement than what I had. Or I could then choose the crystal tool and go ahead and add another one. So you can see here, and it looks like I've added a different color of crystal, but that's okay. You get the idea. So separate to crystal is another one of the options that you have when you have objects with crystals. Now, because this object is no longer filled in with crystals, I can no longer select the options for the styles of crystals. So it's very important when you separate something to crystals. So for example, this fill here, I can still select this fill and control the type of fill pattern for the shape. But if I separate those into crystals, they become individual crystals, which are no longer, they're simply a single crystal, and you can simply choose the style of crystal size and the color of the crystal, but you can't choose the fill pattern any longer. So if you want to have just a few of the crystals in a different color, then maybe that's a great option. And certainly as we start working with graphics, you're going to find that it's necessary to separate the crystals so that you can make small adjustments to them. So okay, so that's working with objects that we've created, and now what I want to do is just prepare to create crystals from some graphics. We're going to continue looking at working with crystals, and this time I've selected an embroidery design and thought that we could look at applying a crystal fill or outline to the shapes of this embroidery design. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess just zoom in on the design a little bit, select this area at the bottom, and show that it's currently set for a step fill with a run stitch outline. Now I'm going to choose to add a crystal outline by choosing the outline tab for crystals. So you can see that it's added crystals around that shape, and I have the ability to choose, I guess, the color of the crystals and the size of the crystals that get applied by just using the menu as I would with any other crystal shape. Now, what I'm going to do is, because I'm going to try and fill this shape and outline it, I think I'm going to select an offset, which will push this outline outside of the shape. So I turn on 2mm offset, and you see it's pushed the little crystals to the outside of my shape. Now, when I did that, before I go any further, I just want to show you something that I can notice now. So if I zoom in really closely, let's say right here, we can see that I have some of my crystals are appearing with red X's and yellow X's on them. Now I wanted to explain why that is. You see, when you have a yellow X, it means that the outlines, or in other words the cutting template for your crystal, is overlapping. And that's not necessarily good, because we want our cutter to be able to cut the entire hole out. And when there's a red X, it means the actual crystals themselves have been aligned overlapping. Now that's something that we can correct. First of all, the ability to see these X's comes from the View drop-down menu, Overlapping Crystals, and if that's turned off, it won't tell you about this. So everything can be seemingly normal, but when you zoom in, there are some issues that need to be corrected before we can go ahead with this design, and we need to first of all have our overlapping crystals turned on. Now, we would have the ability to separate these crystals into separate crystals which would be selectable, editable, deletable, movable. But before that, why don't I try adjusting some of the settings? So I put that offset of 2, and it's obviously created an area where this outline's not working out. Maybe I'll try an offset of 1. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in, and it seems like it's really corrected a lot of the area in here, but there's still just a couple that are needing to be fixed. Well, a couple is not a big deal, but if there's large areas, then it indicates that maybe there's a better way to go about it. So I'm going to choose to leave that. I mean, we could try 0. I'm going to turn all the offset off altogether. I guess I just uncheck offset even. And now if I take a look closer, there's still some that need to be, whether I put that 1mm offset or not, doing this outline around the shape requires a little bit of modification, which I am going to show you in a few minutes or in a few moments here. So if that being the case, then why don't I'm going to give the offset, and we're going to attempt to try and add a fill to the blue area. Okay. So we had that 1mm offset. Gives us a little bit more space to put crystals on the inside. Now why don't we go ahead and select the object again, change to the Fill tab, and choose to add a crystal fill to the shape. That's going to use all the same color, so why don't I choose a different color of crystal to fill in the shape than I did for the outline. So there you have your crystals, and now you can see you have, again, the choice of shape fit, rectangle fit, and I guess you might want to try circular. And each time you can see that I get different pattern in those crystals. Now, I guess we could try contour. Now, notice that because I got that blue, I have these red crosses everywhere. So I'm going to need to offset my blue color to the inside so that they don't touch. So why don't we try pushing that a millimeter to the inside and see if that's enough. Okay, so we've come close, but still not quite. So why don't we try 2 millimeters to the inside and see if... So there you have it. You can see that I've corrected most of the issue there. And yes, there are some yellow squares left to deal with, but it's not a huge amount, and it won't take long. You'll see I can easily fix that. So basically that's how it works. You take your graphics and you apply different styles of crystals to those graphics. Now, so why don't we take a look at breaking these apart. So here I have this whole object selected. Now what I'm going to do is choose, once it's important to get everything the way you like it. Choose the style of fill pattern, choose the offsets, everything that you want to choose, because once you separate it to crystals, you no longer have any of that editing capability, and your only capability to edit is sort of one crystal at a time. So assuming I've done everything I want, and I just want to go ahead and separate the crystals now. And so the whole shape has become filled in with crystals, but they're now individual crystals, and I can, first of all, I'll just select, click away from the shape to let go of everything that was selected, and I'll show that if I zoom in, so here's an area where I have some little yellow squares, and now I can actually click on an individual crystal and then just move that crystal either with click and drag with my mouse, or if I want, I can click on a crystal and just use the arrow on my keyboard to nudge it just ever so slightly until I get it, to that point where I'm happy with it. Either way, whatever makes the most sense. So in this case, there's several crystals that need to be modified. So I just go around and select all the ones that I want to fix. And I either move them or I delete them. You can delete one if that helps. Just having one less crystal helps. Delete it. So it's really up to us how to go about doing that. And same thing with this red outline. I can separate that to crystals as well. And now I can go in and select any one of these crystals that I want to. And so here's an example where there's two that overlap, and it just makes more sense to delete them and have two crystals left, and we'll just try and fix that. But here we'll keep the two, but we'll move them apart until they're better. So you would need to go around your design, and everywhere there was crystals like that, you would have to find the solution. So that's working with crystals, and that's how you can work with overlapping crystals. And basically, you just separate the crystals into individual crystals so that you can select them and delete them until you're happy with the end results. And when you're ready to go, you can send it to the cutter. Now, I guess if you want, we could try to convert this purple. Now, notice the purple embroidery is actually this object, and then this object. So there's 3 separate elements to that color, and I can select them all. Perhaps one of the easiest ways would just be to hold my control key down. So click on one of them, hold my control key down, click on another one, click on another one, and now I have all of it selected. And I could choose to put a crystal fill into that area as well. And maybe we'll choose a different color for our crystal while we're at it so that you can see what that looks like. So it goes a little slower, and the more crystals it's got to add and the more shapes that it's got to sort of think through. And so anyway, it's added crystals to my shape. And again, if I wanted to, I could apply all the different styles of crystal fills for this shape. So that maybe isn't, the shape fit isn't the best sort of bet. Maybe if I go with, for example, contour or line fit, we might get a better result. So you can see, and I don't think I did this one. So we'll do contour. It may be better to go with something like single line. That might be another option. So if we have all these different styles that you can choose from for your crystal designs, and once you're happy, then I'm just going to finish doing this little pattern here. So everything was converted to single line. And then, like I said, any areas, like for example, in this design I have this area where I have to fix these, then you just simply separate the crystals and select on the crystals that you need to get rid of. There you go. So it can be as easy as that, and it's certainly, you can imagine the world of possibilities with crystals. And so hope that you enjoyed the segment on controlling crystals and incorporating crystals into your embroidery patterns.